Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome back to the UUR, a Severance podcast. For those of you who were not here for our first introductory pilot episode, I am Rodnesha Green, janitor at Lumen, for those of you who are watching with us, because I am wearing a janitor jumpsuit.
And I am Callie Thomas. I am wearing the shade of green that is seen throughout the offices. That was not purposeful.
I'm going to presume that you are a Lumen employee who is not on the severed floor, who gets to live a normal life.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Or was I severed and I'm being reintegrated like Petey?
Oh, let's talk about it. We are going to get into it, you guys. So this is episode 2, not only of our podcast, but of season 1. And the title of this one is Half Loop. Any idea as to why that might be the case? I mean, I've been trying to think through it.
I don't know. I was trying to figure out because the last episode was titled The Good Thing About Hell, which I think is a play on Helly's name, but it also comes from a quote from Miss Cobell at the end of the episode about, the good news about hell is that it's not real, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I can't figure out half loop. Is it a quote? Does it have to do with part of the severance process? Maybe I didn't pay attention well enough, although we have copious notes. So
we have copious notes,
know.
And yet somehow it slipped through both of our fingies. Yeah, the only thing I can think is maybe, you know how when you get stuck in a loop in your head, but maybe it's like a half loop because it doesn't complete the circuit?
Each half is a half loop because they're just looping part of their day, right? The Outties are looping without their workday, and the Innies are looping just the workday. So they each have a half loop.
So you can't have a whole loop.
And that's what we're going with.
Cool. Well, who wants to do summary recap today?
Oh, I guess that's me. This is a meaty episode. At the beginning of Half Loop, we find ourselves actually at the beginning of day 1 that we saw in episode 1. But this time we are following Helly R. So Outtie Helly, we see she starts her day by recording the video that Innie Helly is later going to watch. And then she is led by Mr. Milchick through her severance procedure. So this moment jumps from Helly in the operating room to Helly walking out of the stairwell door. So we're now seeing Outtie Helly's perspective of that stairwell sequence. She can tell things are not going well because why does she keep ending up in the stairwell? But once again, Milchick is there to handhold and assure her that everything is going to be okay. Meanwhile, Mark is preparing for his first day as department chief. As he gets the room ready, he sees a portrait of Petey and is saddened by this. He then decides that he's going to hide all of the old team photos, and he's surprised by Helly. So they have a discussion about time and the weekends and lack thereof. Helly is realizing that her Outtie has just experienced a weekend.
But she has not.
Yeah, she has not because she's the Innie. And then enter Milchick. He wheels in a cart full of melon balls.
Yes.
And attempts to initiate an icebreaker game. So no one really seems to be on board about this except for Irving, who is very enthusiastic, but they all realize they have to play along, except for Helly. In the middle of taking the new corporate photo, Helly decides she's ultimately not sold on Lumen and walks away from the melon festivities, determined to pass a message to her Outtie. This leads to Helly's first experience in what happens when the rules are disobeyed at Lumen. On the outside, Mark is on a date with a doula. It's clear this might be Mark's first date since losing his wife, and he is incredibly awkward. The next day, Mark opts to not go to work. Instead, he decides to find Petey, who is hiding out in an abandoned greenhouse. Petey shares some startling recordings with him that bring a little more light to the dark side of Lumen. We end with Mark having taken Petey back to his house to stay hidden in his basement. And despite having a safe space to stay in, it becomes very evident that no place is safe for Petey, who is internally battling a clash of memories, fighting for prominence in his mind. And that is
Very,
the
very well
summary.
said. There's a lot, you guys.
It's meaty. It's a meaty episode.
It is a T-bone steak, this episode. All the meat. Before we go into our scene by scene breakdown of the episode, let's talk about who's showing up in this one.
Yeah, got some new characters.
So we'll just jump to who are the new faces that we see this episode. So we have Miss Casey, played by Dyken Lockman. We have Bert, who is played by the effervescent Christopher Walken. Bert and Miss Casey, by the by, are going to be recurring series regular characters. They just didn't appear in the first episode. For guest stars for this episode, we have Alexa, who is the doula, who Callie and I are certain they never said her name. So thank you, IMDb, for naming her.
Yeah, that character name is not familiar at all.
And Alexa is played by Nikki M. James. We have Mr. Grainer's first visible appearance, played by Michael Cumpsty. And then we have our WMC activists. The first activist was played by Hudson Flynn, and the second by Ruby Stevens. This episode was written by Dan Erickson and Anna Oyang Mo. I still haven't. Why didn't I look up her name?
You forgot to look it up. Sorry, Anna.
We are so sorry. We are going to fix it. We're going to fix it. And it is directed by Ben Stiller. I'm going to know that name by the next one. I'm going to say it right. Okay. Let's jump into our scene by scene for episode 2.
Let's get into it.
Because we got a lot to cover. All right. This one starts, like we said in the summary, basically kind of touching back on what we already saw. Only this time we get to see what the Outtie's going through throughout this severance new orientation process.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to get to see the flip side of it. We still don't know much about her in her life. We're literally just seeing her at Lumen. She's, doing her new hire paperwork, and I guess this is when they haul you off to the surgery ward.
Right?
So
intense to, that they have a space where they're doing this operation there too.
On site. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, y'all got on-site surgeons and they're drilling into people's skulls? Just, what? And then again, to allow someone to drill into the back of your head.
Wild. And that she was conscious for it. She was talking about it.
Also true.
She was talking to him as they're drilling. What?
I guess that somewhat tracks for like brain procedures. I think a lot of brain things they usually do keep you.
Some things they have to keep you conscious for to make sure they're not.
But also, you're usually in a surgical space where they have to have a clean, sterile field. You're not wearing your outdoor clothes. You're not wearing.
Right. Yeah, she was in the same clothes that she ends up in.
She was in her clothes. No hospital gown.
Yeah, her work sweater.
I'm like, what if there's blood and bone spatter all over that nice, cashmere blue shirt?
Yeah.
Ew.
Right. Very, very Black Mirror, this whole scene.
Yeah.
I think.
Now, let me tell you something.
Yes.
I was looking real hard in the background details to figure out more about who Helly is. I'm like looking at the screen, like the little breakdown, the surgical screen. I'm over here like trying to see, okay, is there a name? Is there a last name? Is there a something? I'm scanning. It was not. There was
Well,
nothing.
yeah, I didn't notice anything either. But what I did notice was, all we know about the Outties thus far is Mark's Outie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are assuming, damn, these people who get severed are going through real life tragedies because they want to be able to forget about it for a few hours of the day.
Yep.
And then we realize, well, that's the case for Mark, but Helly seems like super excited to do.
Helly seems gang for this.
We get a clue that there's something very different going on with Helly, but we still don't know anything about her.
Nope. But that's true. That's a good thing to pick up on, that her disposition is wildly different than I imagine Mark's was. And like you said, she seems excited. She's asking questions. She's like ready to do it.
Yeah.
So clearly not everyone who elects to do severance is in a bad place.
I guess.
Or maybe she is, or maybe she isn't, or who knows? We will find out, I suppose. Not only does that intro scene have Helly's day, we're also jumping into when she's in the stairwell, when she's trying to escape. Now, I get that Milchick is, basically like pacifying her at every turn.
Yeah.
But I feel like at some point after like time 3 or 4, I'd be like, listen, homegirl keeps wanting to leave, and maybe I should just go home for the day, or I don't know,
Well, and she does say it a little bit, right? Where she's like, man, I really don't want to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he just continues to be reassuring. But I feel like, okay, you're not consciously aware of what's happening on the other side of that wall, but it's still you. And there has to be some kind of intuition that whatever it is on that side is bad. Not just for the explicit clue of
Mm-hmm.
you, the fact that you're back in the stairwell, but there should be some implicit feeling that it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, girl, trust your gut.
Something's off. Something is not right. I'm with you.
Very
I
odd.
also find it interesting too, the parallel of how there's like a man at each end of the hallway unseen, like off in the shadows. Like you've
Right.
got Mark around just around one corner for Innie Helly, you've got Milchick just around the other corner for Outtie Helly.
Yeah, she's just being corralled, I guess, until she's calm. It's like
Mm-hmm.
cornering a scared animal.
Yeah, exactly. Like, listen, we're just gonna keep, closing in and closing in until you submit, and I guess eventually she does. Oh, goodness. And it's still so trippy to me, the disorientation of going one direction and coming back the other way and having no idea how you ended up, like, how you ended up there, but also you don't feel the transition. So it's just like teleporting almost. It's like teleporting.
Right. It is like teleporting, very much, but it's like your teleportation device is not working because why are you in the same spot?
It's like a glitch. Hey.
But I mean, to
home,
that end,
home.
I do love seeing the other side of it, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing, for every action, there's a reaction, right? And we're seeing the reaction, right? So in the first episode, we see Innie Helly, like, her attempts to leave are getting more and more intense to the point where she is running full speed. And so we get to see Helly like fall and eat it because she's just experiencing the force of being flung. And she falls on the floor and it's
Right.
wild.
She hurled herself.
So it's a really fun scene to watch,
Yeah.
I think.
Talk about fighting with yourself. And then we get to see where Helly got that beautiful arrangement. It's Mr. Milchick who's waiting on the other side of that elevator to give her first day flowers.
Yes.
Another question. Is Milchick giving flowers to everybody on their first day? Or just Helly?
Or is Helly important for some reason?
Is she important? Is she special? Does he have a crush? Who, what?
Yeah.
Because he had those flowers ready, suit and tie.
So one thing about this first like whole orientation scene for Outtie Helly that I did not notice the first time I was watching was Milchick planting the seed for one of her orientation questions. So as he's walking her through the building, they're walking to the operating room. He's pointing out, Kier and pictures of the Eakins, and he's like, Kier's favorite breakfast was 3 raw eggs and milk. And that is one of the questions that gets asked to Helly.
I can't believe I didn't even catch that.
Like, it's a new thing. It's like, okay, here, we're going to check to see if your long-term memories are gone, but here's a short-term memory.
Short-term.
Let's check that.
Ooh.
So they asked what was Mr. Kier's favorite breakfast, and her answer is, that question doesn't even make any sense because she has no idea who Kier even is, which means
what's so funny is I can't believe I did not catch that.
I loved it. I wrote it down. I was like, this is a question.
Because when he asked her that question, I was just like, all right, okay.
Right.
I don't know. It just was one of those, again, just random things. Like he was more trying to like spit knowledge. Like, I know so much about the Eagans. And so that was my thought. Is like, all right, show off. We get it. But now I see that that's actually the intention. Man, I cannot believe I missed that. Good catch.
Right. So they have long-term memory questions.
Mm-hmm.
They have the question about the state to make sure you are retaining just general world knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have this short-term question. It's very specific.
Look at all this trickiness.
Very tricky.
It's like they've had researchers come in.
Right? But it also brings to question, have they always had this procedure, or is this what they've landed on over time. So have they had people that they thought were fully severed and then come to later find out that they weren't, and they're like, oh shoot, we need to adjust our questions to verify that
there
they're
has
severed.
to have been an ongoing process of that, right?
Right.
And whether it happened when they were actively working for them or if they just had people in a lab maybe they were testing the chip on, who knows. I mean, there has to be a refinement process as that's going. And then my question is, at what point does Lumen start utilizing the severance chip? And was there something they were doing prior to that to enact a similar type of corporate loyalty or what have you? I don't know.
And listeners should stay tuned, because we do intend to review a different version of the pilot that might have some answers to these questions that didn't end up in the show.
That did not end up in the original season. Yeah, that pilot's, when we do that episode, that's going to be a grand departure from what we have watched of the series. So that's the opening set of scenes that we get just before we jump into this title sequence. Let's talk about how Severance has one of the most dope title sequences and theme music that good. I have heard in a long freaking time. It's so good. I could listen to that theme on a loop.
Yes.
We're going to talk about this title sequence, which honestly, I'll try to be brief, but it could be an episode in and of itself, like a little mini episode, just talking about it, because there's so much that happens in it. Before getting into the title sequence, the music. So I was kind of sad because I thought for some reason, but it makes sense because it's a pilot episode, right? Usually you don't have a credit sequence at that point.
Right.
I was so bummed that it didn't happen last episode. I was like, no, where's my music? But they definitely dropped the theme. Right. And the first time you hear it is when Mark is checking in at reception.
Yes.
And the thing that I love about the theme music, the juxtaposition of this isolated piano against this like kind of chaotic synth chords that are happening on top of each other. And you just hear that little do-do-do-do-do, like going throughout the clashing synth music. And I'm like, that has to be like indicating like, you know, that little part of you that's like kind of the core of you and trying to weave through all this like chaotic boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. And the piano stays on the higher end, which kind of, it makes me think of like when your ears are ringing a little bit and there's just kind of a little bit of a high-pitched annoyance always happening in the background. That makes me feel like this is always going to be here.
Well, it's like also with it being on those higher notes, it's like it would have to be to pierce through all the calamity and the lower tones, right? Otherwise, it'll just muddle in with everything else. So it's almost like those cries for help that have to get louder and higher to be heard as more and more stuff is coming around it. So it just seems like this
severance floor.
Exactly. So it's like the people crying like, help, help, help. And it's getting lost in the business of day to day, of just
the hustle and bustle of the office.
And then anytime with Mark, you hear that piano. Even when you don't always hear the synth, you'll always hear like, do, 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 do. And so I'm like, oh, I love that. I love little clues that get dropped in musical themes. Y'all, this is a sidebar. This is not a Murders in the Building podcast, but I watched the show Only Murders in the Building. And I was able to guess who the killer was from season 1 just from the music. Yes.
Oh, I did not pay that much attention to that.
But you know why? Spoiler alert for anybody who has not seen all of season 1 of Murders in the Building. Because I used to play.
That is your instrument.
Bassoon.
Yeah. I did know that when the character came out. I was like, oh, I only know what I know about the bassoon because of Rodnesha.
Oh boy. Okay, but yeah, this is not that podcast. But I just to say, pay attention to the music, guys, because sometimes they're putting just as much layering and intention into those musical cues. So you never know. You might get a little insight. But yeah, so going into the visuals of this title sequence. So I don't know if we want to go into each thing. I did write it out. It is a lot.
You wrote it out.
I did write it out. Because I had never, in the first run of me watching it, I had never sat to like look at each frame to see what was going on.
Yeah.
Like I was always just kind of vibing when that part came on. But I was like, I should probably look and see what's happening in each frame. I don't know if we'll have time.
Yeah. Like you said, it could be a whole episode on its own. So maybe later on we might do that. Well, the first notable thing I think for me obviously is it's miniatures. It's all figurines and
Little mini marks.
yeah, not using the actual actors. And what a choice. Like it speaks to like the whole puppeteering of like they're there working and they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. And they're being led by unseen entities. So I was just like, oh my gosh, this whole thing is like it's like a toy set. It's amazing.
So the kind of the key things that stand out that you see in this title sequence, you've got Mark in a suit versus Mark in red pajamas. And what's interesting is there's only one red pajama guy the entire time, but there's like 1,000 business marks.
Yes.
Marks in suits. And so there's some thoughts on what that could indicate or what that could mean. And the funny thing too is that it's the Mark in pajamas that has his Lumen badge,
right,
and not Mark in the suit.
Right.
You also get a lot of this drippy goo stuff happening. And that's another like, what is this? Or like, is this indicating like realities melting into one another or parts of one world dripping down to another? Is it like this kind of leakage that's happening? Could be. Oh gosh, what else? There's so many other things that happen.
Well, it gets more and more chaotic as the sequence goes on too.
And everything's very stacked like a Russian doll. Like there's a doll inside of another doll inside of another doll.
Right. Kind of like their promo art, right?
Exactly.
Like we have real Mark here, but then we've got toy Mark in his head, and it's like, does real Mark have access to this Mark? I don't think so. He's severed.
And then also when that happens in the sequence, it's like you have Pajama Mark running and it looks like he's trying to escape and he jumps over a ledge and then just ends up at the work desk and it's just like, no, how do I get back here?
No, this is not, how do I get out?
When it ends, it's the two of them in bed and then they kind of just glitch merge into one. So it's like, oh, this would be a terrible dream to wake up from if it were a dream. Well, it's not a dream, it's real life. So I highly recommend going through and watching the title sequence just in and of itself if you can. Maybe we will do like a little mini-sode or something where we break down each segment. There is some thoughts on what everything might be pointing to. All that to say, it's a baller opener. This is one of those like credit sequences that I don't skip.
Right.
I look forward to hearing the music. I sit there and vibe with it. It's a good one. So now we're out of the title sequence and we are into the next set of events.
So we see Mark's morning routine. So Mark arrives at the office and he has a folder that he pulls out that has a checklist of things that he's supposed to do. I assume everyone has their own different tasks that they come in one. And it's silly things like dusting off the books of the Egan principles that are set in the wall. And it's like making sure the mugs are straight. Like it's silly menial tasks. And I kept wondering while watching it, what is the purpose of this? Like, don't they have a severed janitor to do these things? Like, why does he have to do it?
Lumen, if you pay the right price, you can get the janitor of your dreams. Just saying.
But yeah, there has to be something to giving them a routine, or maybe their list of things they have to do changes each day. So that's a little bit of something different in their life since they are only experiencing work. I'm not really sure.
I did look up, but of course I don't have it up now. I did look up Mark's checklist to-do list and it's just the silliest thing.
It's so
like and you hear it too later when he does his first department meeting and it's talking about like, hey guys, don't put trash in the recycling, or
put post-its on your face. They give your Outties
clogged pores. And so I don't know if it's a daily department meeting, if it's a weekly department meeting, but it's a silly department meeting is all I'm gonna say. The only serious thing that ends up on that list is that we see that there has been a response to Helly's resignation request.
Helly's still getting adjusted, right? there's a scene where Dylan is explaining the prizes that you get for completing
your incentives.
and he says there's 5 tiers. I'm very curious to see if Reddit knows all 5 tiers because I only saw 3 mentioned. So he says that there's finger traps, there's erasers. The top tier is a caricature portrait, which Dylan has gotten many times. And then in this same scene, Helly is like, well, what about Mark's head cube? Because Mark has the weirdest, like, he has a cube on his desk that's a glass cube that has an etching of his face in it. And Dylan's like, that's just something they gave him, and like brushes it off. So I'm very curious about the cube and how he got it. What is it for? Dylan is a little jealous of it, it seems. How did he earn it? What does it mean?
So if you freeze frame, because as Dylan is talking about the incentives, Helly's reading about it in the training manual, and they do show all 5.
Oh, Lord.
So erasers is if you get 10% completed. Finger traps are 25% completed. 50% completed is, hold on, where is it? Did I write them all down? Did I miss one? Oh, okay, I see. 75% complete, you get the music dance experience.
Oh.
And then 100% complete is the caricature portrait.
Yes.
And then if you do it in the quarterly target time that you're supposed to, that's the waffle party. So those are all 5.
Well, I feel like the way Dylan explained it was incorrect then. Because he made it,
but you have to,
the waffle party was a group contingency outside of the 5th tier, because he said the top tier was the caricature portrait.
I think that's top tier for individual. He did explain it. But again, if you look at the screenshot shows you all of the incentives for each tier. And 4 of them are individually based. And then the 5th one is the waffle party. It's still an individual thing because the waffle party only goes to one person.
He said it's the best. It's the highest performer.
Yes.
If everyone meets their mark in the quarter. Yeah.
But yeah, those are the 5 tiers. Now the Crystal Cube, I went on a hunt for Allentown. Now there's like Allentowns all over the place, so that did not help me. But every time they mention a file, I'm thinking like they must be cities or places or something. And so every time they mention one, I like write it down and I'm trying to see if there's anything distinctive about it. I did look up Tumwater. There is only one Tumwater, and it is in Washington. And they apparently have a beer distillery there that they're known for.
But what does that have to do with the Crystal Cube?
I don't know. Well, no, I'm just thinking Allentown must be something significant. And I'm just trying to figure out what all these names of files mean and what it could possibly lead to. But yeah, I don't know why, because no one else has a cube. It's not like there was a cube on Petey's desk or Irving's desk.
Right. So it's not like a department head thing. And Dylan definitely seems jealous of it. I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I don't either. So you've got people talking about incentives. Irv is upset because where are the photos? I'm sorry, Mark. When did the new photos come in? Oh, they haven't, Mark? Well, the manual says you're not supposed to remove the old ones until the new ones come in. Irv is not having it, okay? He is not here for the foolishness. He is not here for the cavalier attitude. He is not here for the be your own boss.
No, he is not.
Not having it.
No.
So he lets Mark know, not once but twice, brings it up and then brings a memo later that he printed out from the copier, from the manual.
Yes. Because as the department head, Mark should know.
You should know. Come on. I know, and I'm not department head. So in all of this exchange, Helly's filling Mark in. So no, they're talking about how to sort the numbers, and then he's explaining that certain numbers feel or make you feel a certain way.
Right.
Do you think that this is related to the chip? It has to be, right?
What?
The severance chip? Like, do you think that the feeling you get is from the severance chip?
Oh, yeah, it has to be. So it's literally just a grid of numbers 1 through 5, or maybe it goes higher, just floating, and you hover around it with the cursor and it does different things. And then when you experience the data, you trap it. And the way you experience it is different feelings. So he explains that level 1 feels scary, and then they have different feelings. And I don't understand at all.
I just love Helly's response. She's like, do the numbers scream at you?
Right.
Do they start
They're gonna turn
bleeding?
late.
Do they?
I don't
What
understand.
is so scary about them? And no one can explain it. That's what's
Right.
weird too, is everyone's just like, you'll know when you know.
Right.
And
And Dylan's like adamant that Mark is explaining it wrong, but he can't explain it any better.
nope, sure can't. So, regardless of why they're doing what they're doing, Milchick wants everyone to know that what they're doing matters. And how do you let people know that they matter? With melon balls. That's how.
A melon party. A melon bar party.
Melon car.
Yeah.
Melon for you, melon for you. We've got cantaloupe, we've got honeydew,
Right.
we've got. Did they have watermelon? I didn't see watermelon. I think it was just honeydew and cantaloupe. Maybe cassava.
It was pretty colorful.
Maybe there was watermelon.
I don't I don't remember. But anyway, Milkshake brings them these melons. But first they have to do an icebreaker where they roll the ball to each other. It's so awkward.
So can we talk about icebreakers? I love that they included the scene because icebreakers are dumb. You heard it here first. They do not help people get to know one another. They just make everyone feel awkward for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Yep.
It's some stupid activity that nobody wants to do. Stop it. Stop icebreakers. Okay, this is my this is my soapbox. I'm standing on it. Stop all icebreakers. Stop all icebreakers.
Stop them.
Oh.
Yes.
And it's so funny that it's such a pedantic thing, like rolling a ball like kindergartners. Silly.
Yeah, it's so silly. You know, in this scene though, we get a lot of good nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that stood out to me, which is another thing that I didn't notice the first watch through, is we get our first glimpse of Irv's Outtie potentially, because before it gets to his turn, he's looking down at his nails.
Oh, yeah.
And there's blackness under his nails, and he's like trying to figure out why his fingernails are so dirty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something clearly that he doesn't remember. So it had to have been done on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it gets to Mark's turn, he tries to get out of it by saying something hokey, and Milchick catches him and says, oh, you said that at the last one.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, he admits to having broken protocol by taking the pictures of Petey away. And so he admits, I came in and I saw the pictures of Petey and it made me sad. And he expresses this worry about Petey, and Milchick questions it like, hey, when this past employee left, you didn't feel the same thing, or you didn't have an outburst like this where you broke protocol. And
Right.
He's like, well, we knew that was happening. We got a warning that that person was going to leave, but Petey left out of nowhere. He could be dead. He could be drunk on a beach. We don't know. And then Milchick abruptly stops him. But it stood out to me because for me, that's the first sign that the process of severance doesn't turn these people into robots. Like,
Right.
there's some
Right.
actual human empathy happening here that I was like, you got to remove those things to get used to a life like this. But
Exactly.
clearly, it's not been completely removed.
Yeah. It's interesting. He's so incredibly sad that Petey's gone.
Mhm.
And all I can think is that this is probably also residual sadness from losing his wife. It's like
Right.
on some level, this is loss akin to loss he experienced. I think in this episode, they even say, like, basically, if you decide not to come back to work, effectively, you are killing yourself in this reality as you know it.
Right.
You no longer cease to exist. So, in a way, he's experiencing a death. In his Outtie self is also experiencing a death that he has not properly grieved. So I feel like that residual grief is eking into this way that he's processing Petey.
Right.
And even though
So it's probably it's heavier than what he would think he would feel for
Mhm.
Petey, and he doesn't know why.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like every little thing sets him off, and he tries to contain it. And then you have these moments of outbursts where he's just like, I just am so sad about Petey and I don't know what to do and I don't know how to process. Every time he brings it up, someone shuts it down. So it's just like stifling that grief continually, which is, again, what his Outtie self is doing. So homeboy's a ball of mess. He needs to go cry in a corner.
Yes.
He needs to have... Well, he needs to do more than cry.
Right. And you bring up a good point again about that everyone keeps trying to squash this, right? Anytime he's experiencing some kind of upset about it. And it just brings up the question again about like, okay, so why are you trying to hide information about Petey? What do
Right.
y'all know that we
Exactly.
can't know? It's very fishy.
Indeed. Well, so, we get through this melon party, and then Milchek's like, let's get this new team photo. Petey's out, Helly's in. So this was something that I noted in the first episode, but I didn't want to bring it up till this episode. When you look at these team photos, they clearly always do it on the first or second day of a person working on the severed floor. And they always look disoriented. I never noticed it, but the one with Dylan, for some reason, I always thought they were all smiling. But when I looked back, Dylan looks so like, what is happening?
Right.
Now you want to take photos with me and I don't even know these people. So it's like you've got all these people around you like cheesing and you're just like,
Right.
where am I? What's going on? And that just seems like the weirdest thing to me. Like, why would you want to commemorate someone's complete and total disorientation?
Right.
And you have it on in a photo on your desk until the next person comes in.
Yeah.
That seems silly. Why wouldn't you do it when people are oriented and like acclimated and settled in?
But I guess they think having that group photo, this family feeling, is going to help them get acclimated, maybe. I don't know. But it is just a reminder of your first day there if you're the newest person in the photo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like we said in the first episode, the timeline, Dylan was the previous newest person, right? And now it's Helly. And we see when they change out the pictures later that Helly is just as disoriented looking and not wanting to be there as Dylan was in the first photo.
Yeah. And so clearly she's not having it. In all those flashbulbs, she's just like, nope, I'm done. And she goes, grabs a little notepad, and she says, I'm out. And I quit or whatever, and takes off running. And Milchik doesn't try to stop her.
No.
Not like he runs after her. Mark is the only one that goes after her. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like they're waiting to punish her.
Right. And again, it's just another one of those things where I feel like, okay, they must have all tried this before. And for whatever reason that we haven't really pinpointed yet, Mark feels some responsibility to keep her from making the same mistakes that the other ones have made. As everyone else, it's just like, oh, it's business as usual. Now she's going to try to smuggle out a note to her Outtie. We all did it. You know what I mean? So just let her do it.
Just like she's going to have to learn the hard way. And Mark's like, no, not the hard way.
No, not the hard way.
I mean, the only thing I can think is, I guess in some ways I'm wondering, like, certain persona sets seem like they might be prone to question or rebel. Even in their Outtie form, like even in their like blank slate form, they still have a part of them that knows question. Given that Mark used to be a history professor and was very knowledgeable, I would guess that he probably asked a lot of questions, probably got in a lot of trouble, probably went to the breakthrough room a lot of times until he was broken. Petey probably somewhat the same thing. And there's more that gets revealed about Petey's persona later that I think would contribute to why he might also be a rebellious type. And then clearly Helly, somewhere in her, is a bit rebellious too, or wants to know what's going on or needs to have answers. Yeah. And so I wonder if the people who are more prone to just, they get in trouble that one time and they're like, I'll just go with the flow. Like Dylan seems like that type. Irving seems like that type. But for the people that are rebellious and know something's not right, I mean, clearly Mark and Petey bonded to the point that they were trying to figure out how to get out of there. So I wonder if that's why he maybe has some empathy for Helly, like, oh, you're like me where you're not going to rest until they've beat it out of you. And I don't want you to have to go through all that. Like, just get on board. Trust me, the road does not end well at the end of Rebellion. Just get on board. So I feel like he's trying to spare her what he knows is coming.
Yeah.
Because he's probably been to the break room a number of times. And maybe I'm wrong. We don't see that as of yet. But it just seems like they kind of have a kinship in that regard of like, I don't accept this readily.
Right. And I mean, he does reveal, he says some things later on that does show that Helly's not as original a thinker as she thinks she is. Right. And all of the ways that she eventually tries to get messages out, he's already tried. So that it does speak to like them having very similar personalities. To that end, Mark chases after her and this is where we learn that all of the exits to the severed floor have code detectors because you're not allowed to communicate with your outie. Your outie can choose to make a video. They can make a video when you start. They can make a video when you end. That's it. And she gets to the elevator. It locks up, the alarms start blaring, and here comes Mr. Grainer. So Mr. Grainer, we only heard about in episode 1 where Petey thinks that he's being followed by Mr. Grainer. So you get some sense that he's a scary guy, and then you see him, and he's a scary guy.
He is a scary man.
He's like the Severance enforcer, right? So when something goes wrong, they have to deal with Mr. Grainer. And Mark, makes an excuse for her and blames himself and says, hey, I must have missed the part about note smuggling being against the rules in our training. This is my new trainee. It was just a mistake. It was just a misunderstanding.
Poor Mark.
Mr. Grainer's like, I don't really care, bro. Somebody's got to pay.
Somebody's going to the break room.
He gets walked down the hallway, right? And at this point, we don't know where he's going. We haven't heard anything about this yet, this break room, this ominous break room. And Dylan explains to Helly the next time, like, oh, he spent the night in the break room. And she's like, the fuck is the break room? But all we see of it at this point is he walks down the only hall on the severed floor that is not white.
Not white, not lit at all.
It's not just not white. It's not smooth either. It's not slick.
It looks like you're going out a back alley into some other building.
It looks like an alleyway. It looks like you're in a cave. Like the walls are like rough concrete, and you get to the end, and it's Miss Cobell, who is just as scary, if not scarier, than Mr. Grainer,
right?
Opening the door, and then that's the end of that.
And
scene.
It's even more wild that you don't see what happened. So we're still in this mystery of like, what is the break room? Like, what are they doing in there?
Yeah.
And that is the end of that point. And then we kind of jump back to Outtie life. Yes. I love how they take us from the like most ominous point to just like, oh, Mark's on a date. It's like, wait,
Mark's on an awkward date.
Mark's on a hella awkward date. And okay, so we know the doula's name is Alexa. We don't know this as we're watching it because I swear they don't say her name. But I'm just thinking, this is the first date. You're with this dude who, I'm going to assume his sister hooked them up.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like a conflict of interest, right? Because we learned that she is the sister's doula.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you dating your patient's brother?
I don't know.
Why are you even here in the first place? Whole situation's off. Mark is clearly not ready to be dating again. This seems hella unprofessional for your end, and they just don't seem to be having a good time.
No, and it seems so weird. And like Mark is drinking. Like as soon as one bourbon's finished, he's asking for the next one. That to me on a date would be a like red flag. Like, I think I'm going to call a cab and maybe,
Yeah, let's cut this.
We just see each other in the birthing room. Okay, bye. Because the amount he is drinking, I'm like, this man cannot function. He is effectively becoming a functional alcoholic. Like he just drinks. And even on a date.
I mean, on some level, he did the severance procedure because he couldn't be a functioning alcoholic. Like, you know what I mean?
Like actually, I'm bad at this.
Because he was drinking so much to handle his grieving poorly.
That's a good point.
Like, I need to be severed so I can have a job and live.
That's a good point. That might actually, You're like, actually, no, he was a bad functioning alcoholic.
He's not functioning at all, bro. He's not. It's not working for him.
So they're on this date. They're at this restaurant. It's nicer than Pips. So clearly Pips isn't the only place in town. We now discovered there's other places. And the conversation is so stilted. And Mark's just like, shrunken over his table and just glug. And I'm just like, make this end. I don't like it. I'd rather see you on the severed floor. I don't like this date at all. But we do get a little more insight to him personally. He's talking to her and she's basically asking the questions any person would ask about like, okay, so you're severed. How does that work? If you were married, how would that work? You could have a girlfriend at your job and be married in your real life and never know. And doesn't that bother you? And, what if there's other things that you're doing there that you don't know? Like, again, asking the questions that are reasonable questions. And
Right.
I love how Mark, anytime someone throws any opposition in his way where Severance is concerned, he's just like, "Nyeh," like blockade. Like,
Right.
I don't want to hear it. Nope, Severance is great. Nope, you're not taking this from me. Nope, 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 nope.
Which this line of questioning brings me back to the dinner party again, because if his sister is who referred this person, and his sister is of the belief that it's his business to tell people and nobody else's, why does the doula already know he's severed?
Maybe.
Because I don't think he offered that up. I don't. So maybe Rickon has a big mouth and did it again, or
That's
maybe his
true.
sister is a hypocrite. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I was like, this is weird because he didn't bring that up. Why does
I
she
guess he
know?
didn't. Maybe she just assumed. I don't know. That's a good question. Or maybe there is a possibility. I mean, it's still, it would contradict what the sister said unless the sister checked in with him first. But maybe she's like, just so you know, like maybe there's people that have a problem dating people who are severed.
Yeah,
Like,
let's give her some grace. Okay, we like her. Let's give her some
well,
grace.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna presume that she didn't out him without his knowledge. Is what I'm gonna presume.
Yeah, I want to fix you up, but I gotta. This is a pretty important piece of information for a blind date.
Yeah. And that way it doesn't become awkward on the date of having to explain what severance is and da da da. So let's hope that it was in good faith that it was done. I was gonna say the one thing that does come out too when they talk is when he says that he works at Lumen, she was like, yeah, you and nearly half this town.
Yeah.
So this is when we see that Lumen is like one of those big looming corporate
Yes.
entities in this town that pretty much everybody works for, which makes sense because
Yeah.
that building is crazy huge.
And this is where she also asks about him living in Lumen housing.
Yes.
Yeah. So we realize like, oh, he lives in some kind of development that's owned by Lumen,
Mm-hmm.
and could explain Mrs. Selvig being his neighbor. I don't know.
So here's a question for you before we move on. If you are a married person, do you take a severed job or would you date someone who was severed?
No, because of for the exact reasons that she said, right? What if he has a whirlwind office romance?
Mm-hmm.
What if he gets a chick pregnant, which I did write
Mm-hmm.
that down at some point when it's like, actually, it's very on my next page of notes where it's like, oh, what if he develops a relationship with Helly? What happens? First of all, for the other severed person to be like a pregnant person and know how you got pregnant in one reality,
Right?
but not know how you got pregnant in the other reality.
I
Wild.
guess it would only be jarring because you would still have a day to day,
Right, you would
right?
have
You're
a
still going
day
to
to
see.
day. So, but I
It would be
think
jarring if you got pregnant off site and then just started becoming pregnant at work and you're just like, what is happening to
well,
me?
I think I mean, it technically could happen either way though, right? They could have
Oh,
sex in the
true.
bathroom at
True,
work.
true.
Now, the work persona has no access to pregnancy tests, so they just gonna have to notice after a while. But I think they would still realize before the outside, or maybe their outie would be like feeling symptoms and put it two and two together and take a test and figure out I
Yeah.
must have gotten pregnant at work. But just
Mm-hmm.
wild. But yeah, being someone who is not severed and having a partner that is severed, I would be concerned. I mean, I watch too many crime docs and conspiracy things. So I would be concerned like, why do you need to be severed to work there? Why do you need to be severed? And why does that company need severed employees? What are they doing there?
Mm-hmm.
I'd be concerned
Mm-hmm.
about what work you're going to do. And knowing that I can't get any answers about that is disconcerting. And then also office romance.
Yeah, those are real. Those are real in every world. Those are happening. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I wondered more so like what would happen if you were married and someone, I mean, I would hope they wouldn't take that job without talking it over with you. But
Right.
then do you give the okay? Maybe it depends on finances, but I'm just like I don't know how I'd be able to fathom you living a life.
Or like if you are married and you decide to get severed, do you just not say anything and you just
Live life.
make up a story when you talk about work and live
Hmm.
life?
Interesting.
Just making me remember things that happen
Yeah,
later. So
we'll come back to it.
we'll like
Just thought I'd throw that out
discussion.
there. Just wanted to see if anyone
Yeah.
had any severance sympathy. I could not.
What? Oh.
It is what it is. So, we're leaving the date. Honestly, homegirl should have just gone home right then and there. She should have been like, well, this was fun. My cab's over here. My place is this way. But they're walking and talking, and Mark is just stumbling drunk. And I'm just like, why are you still here,
Yeah.
Alexa? Go home. This is a dead end road, okay? Do you see this man?
You can do better, girl. We don't know anything about you, but we know you can do better.
Mm-mm. Anyway, she sticks around. And then they run into some activists, protesters, canvassers, whatever you'd like to call them. For the WMC, this is the first time we hear about this organization. It's called the Hold Mine Collective, which apparently are an organization that are trying to stop the spread and influence of severance. So they are very anti-lumen, very anti-severance. They have a lot of literature on why they are anti, and they kind of approach with like, do you want to save kids' lives, or do you want to help kids' brain health, or something like that?
So this is the first hint that maybe severance is not isolated to this one floor in this one office. Maybe Lumen is trying to expand it to many things. They're trying to sell it as a procedure you can get just in your regular life, or I don't know, but they're clearly concerned that they're doing it to children.
Right. And I think when Mark accosts them like an idiot, I think they make some points of like, did you know that severance is trying to make it citywide or statewide or something?
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically like they're trying to get it in more places. They're trying to make it not just a work thing, but a life thing. And so this is the first time we're hearing that there is an agenda with severance. Yeah. And like you said, it isn't just relegated to this one company and how they choose to work with their employees. There's clearly a bigger picture going on with what these folks in the shadows want severance to become. So Mark goes off like an idiot. Oh gosh. And it just is a bad look. I'm like, did homegirl not have a car? Maybe she was stuck.
Yeah, maybe she was stuck. Time out. I'm just realizing that when I closed my balcony door for the noise, I left my dog outside. She is crying. Hold on. Oh, and it's raining. That's why she was crying.
Oh.
So she was fine until it started raining. I was like, why are
no.
you
She's
wet?
like, let me in.
Oh man, freak rainstorm. Okay.
But yeah, I don't know if homegirl didn't have a car or couldn't catch an Uber. I don't know what the case was, but I just couldn't believe that she was still there while he's ranting at these children, because they aren't even like adults at his age level.
Right. They're like young college students volunteering to hand out flyers for something. Like that's what it seems like. And then she even has to like break up the interaction. Like she has to be like, come on, let's go. Come on.
Yep. Oh, Lord bless your caring heart. Maybe it's like the doula nurse in you. You're like, I can't just leave you like this.
Probably caring personality. This whole exchange from the date to the Whole Mind Collective, though, makes me just be like, hey, Mark, maybe therapy would have been better.
Oh, we didn't bring that up, how the sister did ask him at the dinner.
I was going to say that. So, she does allude to, or she does mention like, maybe you should have stuck with the therapy. So he did do it at some point.
We clearly didn't stick it out.
If you concluded that you needed to do severance, though.
Oh, so that's the date. I don't think there's more to say. It was uncomfortable. It was awkward. Mark goes home and probably passes out drunk. Yeah, who knows? Actually, no, he goes home and drinks some more. That's right. Yeah, he's not done. You need to go to bed, Mark. Yeah. Go to bed. So he goes home, he pours another drink. We see the card that Petey left him is sitting on the counter. He takes kind of another glance at it with some intrigue. Yes. And then we hear a knock at the door. Guess who it is? Our favorite neighbor lady, Mrs. Selvig. It's like, a sitcom. Like, here she comes.
Again.
And she's got cookies in tow. Now, I don't know what kind of cookies those were. I tried to look. They didn't look like normal cookies.
She said she was experimenting with lavender and something else.
I can keep them cookies. They looked like maybe tea cakes of some kind.
Yeah, some kind of shortbread. I mean, Mark said they were great cookies.
But did you look at his face when he said it?
Right.
I don't think he really thought they were great.
Well, and it's so funny because she like does that, like she stands at the door and like doesn't go away.
Hmm. Also, made note, I'm like, she's clearly been in that house before because she mentions how the bulb is still out in his
Yep.
hallway. And I'm like, Miss Selvig, I need you to not be over here so much.
Right. Like, I mean, I be knowing some neighbors better than other neighbors, but they don't be in my house.
Mm-mm. We commiserate at the trash can. That's our spot. And then you go home and I go home. And that's that. But she comes over with cookies. She's still over the moon about these bins and messing it up, which again, is this a new thing? It's so confusing. And then she stands at the door until he invites her in, like a creep. And then she's over here prodding about, "Oh, you smell nice. Where you want to date?" And I'm like, this lady is the epitome of a nosy neighbor. I need you to not be all in my business.
Right.
And so, they're shitty chatting and she's giving whatever kind of advice about her husband. And it's funny because, so here's the other thing. So we get to Miss Selvig versus Miss Cobell and they keep dropping little tidbits. We've talked to them about it, like the little wisdoms that she gives about her mother. She's already dropped a few, some that are contradictory. So you're kind of like, wait, was her mother an atheist or was she a Catholic or was she both? Hmm?
It's the two parts that conflict each other,
Mm-hmm.
though.
And then now we're hearing about a husband. So it's like, did she really have a husband ever? Or are we making this up? Who knows? So Miss Selvig slash Cobell is still an enigma. We're getting little breadcrumbs about her possible life outside of Lumen, but still no complete picture. And again, she seems to have a very odd intrigue with Mark. I don't know what it's about. And, we could boil it down to her just trying to spy and see if he knows anything about Petey, which she is doing. But I think there's some stuff that comes up later in this episode where it's like, no, I feel like you have like an emotional investment in this man, like in a different kind of way.
Right.
What's that all about?
Yeah. Which, back to our question about why Mark and not anybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could be the reason why he's been chosen to take.
So Miss Selvig pieces out. I guess Mark is still feeling away. So he's like down in the basement, and apparently they've got a bunch of storage stuff down there where him and his wife have things. And it seems like he goes through a box of her things and pulls out like a red and green candle.
It's marked Gemma's crafts, so it's like her arts and crafts and things she's made.
And then he puts it back and goes back upstairs like a sad boy. So it's the next day. He slept it off. We're going into work.
Yeah.
He gets dressed, goes to work, or gets ready to go to work, and then realizes that he's still got that flyer from when he went off on those folks. And then thinks to himself, wait a second, Petey's card. And decides to play hooky.
And we see that Mr. Milchick, he has contact with all of the Outties, right? Because he's ushered in Helly earlier in the episode. And now Mark has to call him to call out sick,
right, yeah.
As he's driving to the address. And it's just interesting because this is where, we talked about this in the first episode, but this is where for me, I was like, is he severed or is he not severed? He could still be severed because it's not like we see an Outtie, his severed job is he's allowed to be aware of the other Outties, so he might still be severed, but you could say that he's not, because the other severed people are not aware of each other's Outties, can't interact with them. So
I mean, they haven't clarified it, but it's definitely seeming more and more like there is the possibility that upper management gets to retain their in and out lives versus having it separate, but it's not 100% clear.
Yeah. I think it's far more clear for Mrs. Selvig / Miss Cobell than it is for Milchick at this point.
Yeah. And it becomes even more clear in the scenes to come in this episode. But yeah, so, he's put Milchick on alert, and clearly that puts the rest of upper management on alert. They have a whole meeting, him, Grainer, and Cobell. Clearly they are worried that maybe this is Petey related, but then they don't have any evidence that it is. So they just kind of have to accept it as is. So that puts us back at Lumen. Everybody else in the office is kind of shocked that Mark's not there, theorizing what it could be. Helly is still trying to understand what these numbers are all about. Dylan's like, you know what? Now that boss is gone, I'm going to give you the real 411 on how to do these numbers and perks and all the
Right.
things. So he gives Helly kind of the breakdown of what the files are, completion time, all of that. While they are chatting, we get an interesting scene with Mr. Irving. Irv's at his desk. He's just, typing away, doing his thing. And then all of a sudden, you just see stuff start to ooze around his computer. And then he's looking up and stuff is oozing from the ceiling and dripping down and all around. And it's just like this weird black goo.
And it's the same goo that we got introduced to in the title sequence.
True. So is this signifying some kind of something happening in the mind? Because clearly, like, he's awake, but not awake.
Right.
I guess, and effectively having a daydream of sorts. And just as it looks like it's starting to, like, creep to his hand, he, like, freaks out. And then we see that, Mr. Milchick's there. And you don't look none too happy about this. So then my thought is this must have happened before. I mean, we've heard about Irving dozing off.
Right.
And I guess maybe this is considered that
right.
as well.
So that was my thought, because before this, at the beginning of the scene, they're discussing whether or not, Mark is sick, or if he got booted. He couldn't have gotten booted so closely after Petey being gone. But Irving expresses that if he were department chief, he would be doing things a lot differently. And that's when Dylan's like, hey, you only beat me by a little bit, which I don't understand if Irving has been there 3 years and he's been there one year.
Been there one.
But he says, like, at least I didn't get docked for dozing. So when this happened, I was like, did he fall asleep? Like, I know we don't see him sleeping, but is this a dream, not just a daydream?
Is he actually asleep? Yeah.
I'm not sure. But like you said, Milchick is not very happy about it.
It also seems like in the past, the punishment was the break room, right? So, at this point too, by the by, guys, there's a lot of back and forth that happens between the office and Outtie life because Mark's kind of going on his own adventure. So I think we're just going to kind of break down what's happening on one end and then break down what's happening on the other end. So sticking with the office, Milchick talks to Irving, and it seems like in the past, the punishment for his dozing may have been the break room.
And he says, like, we don't want to send you to the break room again.
And so Milchick makes that clear that's not going to be the situation this time. He's going to go to the wellness center. Is this the first time we've heard of the wellness center?
Yeah, this is the first time we've heard of the wellness center. Get to go for a wellness session.
That's right. With Miss Casey, who is, again, a new character we're going to be introduced to shortly. So it doesn't seem like Irving's ever been to the wellness center before. He kind of goes down to the area and it's set up very much like, you're going into a massage clinic. Like the waiting area's got like some greenery, some plants. The chairs are not that neutrally gray-green color, and color palette isn't just straight stark white.
But also still retro.
Yes.
More colorful, more lifelike, but still retro feeling.
Another thing, since we're on that, I was going to bring up last episode is the interesting use of music between Outtie World and Lumen World. And anytime they're in Lumen, there's always like this 60s bossa nova style music that's going on while they're at work, whether they're doing activities or working or what have you. It's like that's kind of the tone or the vibe they're trying to set for every day at Lumen.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting, the choice that they made for that style of music, because it kind of harkens back to this prevailing thought of like, oh, things were so much better back in the 50s and 60s when you just worked and your life was your job and people took care of you, your job took care of you. Like, it's very much going back to that retro thought that like you had a job and you were committed to your job and your job took care of you and your job was like your family, and like, you stayed there for years and for decades and made it like your life. And clearly that is not the way we view work nowadays, nor how work views its employees. But there was a prevailing thought back then, and some truth to it as well. It's like your job took care of you, and in turn you gave it your fealty, right? So I found it interesting that they chose to use that music every time you're at Lumen, because it's like that's the kind of vibe they want it to be.
See, I didn't think about it in that sense at all. I kind of just thought the retro theme across the decor and the music was maybe to confuse them about what time period they're living in while being at work.
I mean, it could.
I thought it was like, ooh, maybe it's to throw them off.
I mean, it could be that from a why they have it decorated that way as a lumen, but I'm just thinking in terms of like visual storytelling, why they're using the music the way they're using it in each environment. And they always very specifically use that 60s style music. And so the first thing I thought of was like, oh, this is giving me like Dick Van Dyke vibes, where you love to go to work and your whole purpose was around your job and what you did for your company and all that other stuff.
Are there any scenes where they can hear the music?
Only when they have Defiant Jazz future
In the
episode.
future. Oh, okay. Okay.
Unless that music was going while Irv was in the waiting room, because that was another time I heard it was when he was in the waiting room.
Well, that's why I asked that. I wasn't sure if it was.
I don't know if that was why can't I think of the word? Hello, listeners. This is future Rodnesha speaking into the past. So, the word that I got stuck on here is the word diegetic or diegesis, which essentially, if you haven't heard the term, means when sound in a movie or a television program is occurring within the context of the story and is able to be heard by the characters. If any of you are fans of Guardians of the Galaxy, think that. Okay, just wanted to throw that in. Little lesson for the day. Here we go. Back to the pod.
Back to Irving's prior punishment for his dozing. Why punish the Innie for something like that? Because it's very clearly his Outtie is doing something that is causing him to not get enough sleep, that he's falling asleep at work. And exactly. They do punish the Outtie by docking the pay of the time that the Innie has slept. Mm-hmm. I mean, and maybe that's why they decided this time to send him to the wellness center. But in the past, he's been sent to the break room. Right. And it's like, that man can't control that.
Right. He sure can't.
Right. What he gonna do? Okay, I'll be sure to get more sleep when I go home. Oh, I can't make that choice because I'm not the one that's gonna be home.
Yeah, that definitely does not make sense. And again, it just seems like the break room is just the default punishment for any misbehavior. But clearly they're realizing, okay, that's not working. He's still falling asleep. He's still daydreaming. So maybe he needs a relaxing time at work.
Right.
So before we get into the wellness center, Irving is in the waiting room. And then a man comes outside of the wellness center. And this is the character of Bert, played by Christopher Walken. First off, John Turturro and Christopher Walken in one series. Crazy.
And I hadn't noticed Christopher Walken's name in the title sequence, right? And he's credited in the first episode, even though he's not in it. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't know, because he's a series regular. I didn't notice it. So I was like, Christopher Walken, when he walked out of the door the first time, I was like, yes, this is amazing.
It was a delightful surprise. And I can't even say I remembered seeing it in the credits. I just looked up and I was like, oh, what? He's in this too? So he's playing a character named Bert. Bert, we come to find, is with optics and design, which is a different department on the severed floor. We don't know what they do. I'm sure optics and design are somewhat a part of it.
Well, Irving is admiring
the
a painting mm-hmm. in the room, right? And he does say, once he finds out that he's from optics and design, he's like, oh, this is you. So it has to do something with them.
The visual aesthetic within Lumen.
Right. They are responsible for the decor or it seems like they are
branding
it seems like maybe they're more closely related to what Mark thinks his job is, in that they're like kind of museum curators for the art of the Egans, because they're responsible for
true. But they also make the totes. So
they do make the totes, which I was like, what is the purpose of the tote? Because who is using a tote at work?
Irving.
And do they take this tote, and it's a book tote, do they take this tote home and then their Outtie is like, the fuck I'm gonna do with this tote? What? The tote? I got a tote today? Okay, I guess. And then it's like sad for the Innie, like, you're never gonna get that tote back because they're not bringing that tote to work. Okay. I thought way too much about the tote.
I was gonna say you thought way more about it than I did. Well, here's the other thing too. With optics and design, are they responsible for the optics of all of Lumen or just the severed floor?
Well, I think it would have to be just the severed floor, because they can't leave the severed floor to do work around Lumen.
But they could curate projects that they just don't know where those projects are going.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know. It would make more sense for it to just be the severed floor, but I'm wondering if they do more than the severed floor. Why would you need a whole department just to curate art for the
Well,
severed
and there's
floor?
only two of them.
Yeah.
Well, why do they need any of the departments on the severed floor? Is what we don't know.
But I guess, again, if it's just art curation and paraphernalia and it's only for the severed employees, like you said, who's using that? Now, I do find it funny. I don't think it's in this episode, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Irving is the only person who uses a tote. And I find that hilarious because, and we'll talk about it next episode, they end up taking a bit of a field trip and Irving has his tote in hand, books in it. And I'm just like, what books are you carrying around? Or what are you bringing with you?
Right. And where was that being stored?
That I don't know.
Like, where did he keep the book in the totes?
Don't know. Now you're going to think about it some more. Where
I am going to think about the totes some more. I'm going to be looking for these totes the rest of this.
Where are they storing them? So anyway, so going back to Bert and Irving, they do have a lovely discussion about this weird portrait that is hanging on the wall in the wellness center that makes zero sense to us at this point. Mm-hmm. The portrait is apparently of Keir Egan, and there's 4 entities that he is opposite of, and you just see him, and he's looking like some Zeus, Moses looking type of dude in the portrait, and he's holding a whip, like cat o' nine tails whip, and you're just like, okay. And then like on the ground are like these 4 figures that are like trembling in fear with their hands up in front of them. 2 of them are women. One's an older woman, one's a younger woman, and then one of them is a goat. And then the other one is a clown or a jester? What? And they're over here looking at it like it is the dang Mona Lisa. And I'm just like, this is weird.
Right. It's very Renaissance art. It's very biblical art, but the content is all has to do with the Egans. Mm-hmm. And then as they're discussing the artwork that O&D has put up and taken down and rotated through different exhibits throughout the Severance floor, which we see Irving is very, very interested in, we realize, oh, this is only Egan stuff. They don't get no outside art. This is all Egan's.
Yeah.
And they don't make the art. They just curate it. But they make the totes. They design the totes.
They design the totes. And those new totes are coming. says Bert before he leaves.
Right.
We've got new totes. They're coming. By the by, I misspoke. It is a ram, apparently, not a goat.
Oh, a ram. Okay.
It's either way, still weird. Still weird. And I also found it funny that, again, looking at that photo, Irving says that it is calming to look at. They remark about, I guess, how it used to be in a different department and they moved it to the wellness area. And Irving thinks that that was a better choice because it has a calming effect. And I was like, what? What?
No.
Man with a whip?
No.
What?
Feeding his wife and child, maybe, and his pet? I don't know.
And his jester? So, none of it makes sense. So anyway, and then it's interesting because as they're talking, I can't remember if I felt this way initially, but I think I did. They don't make it clear what the vibe is between the two of them in their discussion. But I'm pretty sure the first time through, I was kind of like, wait, is this more than buddies? And what I find interesting about that too is that not just that it's like, 2 men, but older men. And so you don't see a lot of romances play out between men.
Yeah.
And between older couples.
Right.
So you don't think to look for that initially. But there was definitely these little kind of side looks and these kind of like bashful eyed things that were happening. And I was just like, wait, are we feeling each other?
Yeah. Bert is more of a pursuer.
Go get him. Mm-hmm.
Bert is a little more like, I'm not going to shy away from this eye contact. I'm not going to break.
Irving is definitely the more bashful. He's just like, oh.
I love Irv. Oh. So cute. He's like,
this portrait was made by Keir Egan.
Right.
And, yeah.
Like, oh, are you flirting?
Yeah, definitely more the aggressor on Bert's part.
Right. And it's like, at the very least, if it's not a romance, you feel happy that Irving may have a person in
Has
Bert,
a person.
Right? Irving does not get along with anyone in his department. Like, they get along to get along, but no one gets him.
Right. No one gets his catchphrases.
Right. He's much older. He takes his job a lot more seriously than the rest of them.
No one has his devotion to Kier the way he does.
Right. It was just nice to see him have a connection in Bert.
Agree. So I think for sure when I watched it the first time through, I was like, I'm not sure what this is. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it is. But like you said, it is kind of nice that he has kind of a buddy on the inside, it seems like. He has a person that kind of gets him that he gets as well. So I was like, oh, well, yay. Now he's got a friend. Oh, that's nice.
Yes. And this gives us yet a third clue in this episode to potentially some personality traits of Irving.
True.
Because again, we've had some hints previously that their personality doesn't get severed. They still have the same personality. So he's very into art. He's very into art history.
Very intellectual.
So the question of, is his Outtie an artist? I'm not going to say what the black under the nails is, because I'm not going to pretend to the listeners that I knew this the first time watching through, but it's a clue. Maybe I'm curious to see if anyone's putting that together. He's got black under his nails. He's very into art. He's not sleeping well at night. Oh, it's just like little nuggets about Irving.
Oh, side note, going back to little nuggets. Sounds weird. But going back to that, when Irving has his daymare, nightmare, the music is like, the theme Severance music, but then there's electric guitar that comes across his moment.
Yes.
Very aggressive electric guitar, which I won't say what that means now, but it will mean something later.
Foreshadowing. Yes, it does. Ooh, I didn't make that connection.
See, music clues. I'm telling people, listen to music. Listen to it. So that was something that stood out to me more definitively in hindsight. So again, like Callie said, I'm not going to say that I picked up on that the first time and was like, oh, but going back and watching it, I was like, oh, look at that. They were telling us before they told us.
Yeah, I love
it. So now we're going to go into our wellness session. I'm going to put on my wellness voice, much like Miss Casey would. So Irving goes inside the wellness center. It's very calming. It looks like the inside of a cave, which I guess is calming.
And there's like, it's more like, it's like a secret garden.
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Tree in the center.
There's a lot more nature than you see anywhere else on this floor.
Of nature. Yeah, and there's some subtle nature noises too.
You've got some water, some kind of birds chirping things happening, nature sounds, very set up to seem like you're not trapped inside a building with white walls.
Right.
And then Miss Casey's just sitting there, legs crossed, looking prim and proper, got this super cute bob, and it's just going over the procedure of the wellness center. So here's what we know about the wellness center. You basically sit there, and at least in this particular session, I don't know if this is every wellness session, but in this particular wellness session, Miss Casey will read some things about your Outtie and reads them off to you. Now, you are not allowed to react or respond to any fact more than another. So you just kind of have to sit there and just let it wash over you. Apparently, you get points taken off. What those points mean or what happens when you get to 0, no one knows.
Well, she says it ends if you run out of points.
Oh, okay. But... okay. So you start at 100, and I guess every reaction you get 10 points off. So basically you get 10 chances to act right. So that is the wellness session as it pertains to Irving. Just so you guys know, if you don't remember or maybe you weren't paying attention to it, these are some of the facts that Miss Casey read to Irving in his wellness session. She said, let me put my Miss Casey voice on. Your Outtie is generous. Your Outtie is fond of music and owns many records. Your Outtie is a friend to children and the elderly and the insane. Your Outtie is strong and helped someone lift a heavy object.
That's my favorite.
Okay, wait. Your Outtie attends many dances and is popular among the other attendees. Your Outtie likes films and owns a machine that can play them. Sorry.
that one specifically made me feel like they want them to be confused about what time period they're living in. Because why would you say a machine to play them and not like
A machine that can
watch
play them.
DVDs or you watch cassettes or whatever.
Yep.
I don't know.
Keep it all vague. Keep it vague. Your Outtie is splendid and can swim gracefully and well. So this one is one where Irving kind of laughs, and this is where she's like, ah, ah, ah. No laughing, 10 points off. Anyway, back to it. Your Outtie values water. In what way, I don't know. A photo of your Outtie with a trophy was once in a newspaper. Your Outtie has no fear of muggers or knaves. Now that definitely puts you in a different time period. Knaves, lady? Knaves? Here are the last two. Your Outtie likes the sound of radar. Your Outtie is skilled at kissing and lovemaking, which he reacts to again, and that's another 10 points off. So while all this is being told to Irving, we do see that there is a camera inside of one of the little rock centerpieces. So they are watching you during your wellness session. And I think it was Cobell, right? Or was it Milchek that was watching the wellness session?
Cobell.
Yeah. So all your wellness sessions, everything, just assume if you're on the severed floor, you're being watched. I mean, I get the paranoia now from Petey.
Right.
Like, just assume you're being watched all the time.
All the time.
Mm-hmm. And again, kind of going back to what we were talking about, like these things that they're being told in generalities and just keeping it very vague. I wonder if, again, the wellness check isn't just, you know, to help you get better, but if it's a way to see if the severance chip is doing what it's supposed to do. Like maybe the times that you react, which is why they give deductions. It's like if you're reacting too much to things, you're recognizing too many things, and that's not good. So session over. We're not going to tell you too many more facts because it might mess with your chip, you know? So I wonder if that's part of it. The poking in on the wellness session is to see, okay, let's see what he's responding to or what's kind of getting him to react.
Right.
So maybe that's why.
I feel like some of the facts have to be plants, though, too. I feel like they can't all be real.
True.
Or maybe they could be, but I feel like if we're testing what you're testing, right, you need a control for the reactions, too. So do they react because they're remembering something? Or do they react just because they get a kick out of that, the idea that their Outtie does that thing or is good at that thing? And you can't know that without also giving them some fake facts.
Right. Now, they cut off on that last one, but I don't think that was the end of the wellness session.
Right.
So there may have been some other things that came out that we just didn't get to see.
Yeah. So my thought on the points is that that's how long your session lasts, right? It doesn't end with you having points remaining, is what I'm assuming with the way they kind of cut it off mid-thing. So maybe he just gets to keep going until he has 10 mess ups.
Well, didn't they tell him that he had scheduled time? Didn't they say he had like an hour or something?
Oh, I don't know. But she does also say that a bigger reaction or not following can make him lose all of the rest of his points at once, too. So maybe the session can be earlier than an hour. I don't know.
How does one gauge too big a reaction?
I don't know.
Versus just a slight reaction.
Miss Casey has to. Well, and you know, she says enjoy these facts equally. So I wonder if you kind of hoofed at the first one and you be allowed to at all of them because that's equal.
That's true.
I don't know.
That's what I would do. It's like I just laugh. That's my default.
I'm just gonna fake a laugh in case I have a genuine visceral laugh that I can't help. I don't know.
There's probably a way you could game the system,
right? It's like
if you have had a wellness session once, like, okay, now I know that I can't do one thing on one and not on the other. So if I start on the first thing doing one thing, then I can do it for all the things.
It's like with the lie detector test where you like pinch yourself or like step on a push pin or something when you're telling the truth. So it can't detect the difference in the spikes when you are lying.
Is that what folks do?
That's what spy shows tell me. I mean, I don't know if that's what folks really do, but that's what they do in the movies.
Spy shows tell me. Oh boy. So that's the end of the wellness session with Miss Casey. That is all for her part today. We go back to the MDR space and Helly is there. She's trying to find out more about these code detectors. She is trying to break the system. She's like, listen, I'm going to get the details on this and I'm going to find a way out. Dylan's just kind of like, just no, lady, like you're not the first.
Yeah,
and
it's not gonna work.
Helly's determined, if nothing else. She is determined. So she's at the desk. Irving comes back. He's looking much more zen than he was when he went in.
Very refreshed.
Could be for multiple reasons. I mean, we did find a friend in addition to have a nice little get to know your Outtie session. So he's looking much more chill. But in that moment is when we have another weird desk situation. Helly sees the scary numbers. And the visceral demeanor shift, again, over numbers. Kudos on acting, you guys. Like, they have to look at a screen full of 1s and 2s and 4s and 5s and be genuinely scared. And you can look at her face and just be like, okay, she is terrified. But what is she seeing? Like, when the numbers happen, are you seeing something in your mind? Are you just feeling just a sense of dread that you can't get past? Are you imagining the worst thing that could happen to you?
I mean, it confirms why it's so hard for everyone to explain to her, right? Because she can't even explain it after, other than the numbers were scary. There's nothing more specific than that. She just ends. They're like congratulating her for finally being able to do it.
They hardcore are like, cheerio, pip pip, you did it.
Yeah.
And she's just like freaked out at the computer. Like, a group of numbers just scared the piss out of me.
Right. The living daylights.
But this is a milestone in their eyes. She's crossed the bridge. She's experienced the numbers. Mm-hmm. She sorted them and boxed them and got them in. And they're like, all right, you're on your way. Right? And she's just like stunned at the computer. And just keeps repeating, they were scary. They were scary. The numbers were scary. So that's it at the office. Now we got to swing back around to what's been happening outside the office, because we forgot that Mark has been on his little excursion to go find Petey.
Mark has not come to work, right? So he called out. So this is happening at the same time. And the destination ends up being this abandoned greenhouse that Petey is hiding out in. And it's here that Petey explains more of why he had to get out, but he's still being very cryptic, very vague. He's just like, it's very bad there, guys. It's very bad there. And we get to see the first kind of symptom of his reintegration. He starts having like shooting pain in his head, and he's reacting, and Mark's like, what is going on? And he's like, it's reintegration sickness. And Mark is like, that's new. And he reveals that he's the first person that it's happened to. Right. So he's the first person who has tried. So again, it's like, well, who are these people who helped you bypass the chip? And why are you the first person? There's so many questions.
So many questions
involved, less things are answered, and there's more questions come up.
It's interesting because he clearly is not the first person they've helped reintegrate or get unsevered or whatever you want to call it, but he's the first to have this sickness. So then it bears in mind, like, what happened in his procedure of unsevering that didn't go right, or did something not go right, or is it his chip is different?
I was going to say, or is it something that, Lumen is aware that has happened before, so they've
and they're trying to make it harder
happen. You can just see he's in so much pain. And at one point he explains it's only temporary. And my immediate thought was like, oh, poor Petey, it's only temporary because it's gonna kill you. Like, you don't look like someone who's gonna survive whatever is happening to you. That's why it's only temporary. Like,
he does not. He's not looking good.
He's not looking good at all.
Not to mention the fact that he's on the lam.
Right.
So it's like, you're not even in like a set environment where you can take care of yourself. Who knows if there's maybe like post-op things that you should be doing to help with the reintegration sickness or whatever.
He obviously feels like it's not safe to go to a hospital. I don't know, because maybe Lumen would have checked hospitals first, or maybe Lumen's reach is into the hospital since they work in pharmaceuticals and all kinds of whatever stuff is, we don't know. Very like possible. How far is Lumen's reach? Is this town in a sense like a college town, or just like how the town like Google campus in San Jose, like obviously San Jose existed before, but if you go anywhere near Google, it's just Google people doing Google things in all of the restaurants out everywhere, So
sidebar, coinciding to what you're saying, I think it was either last episode or this episode, it does come up where Mark is from originally and where they are now. So the town they are in is named Kier.
Oh.
They live in Kier.
I missed that because I kept trying to figure out where they were.
I think it comes up I don't. I know it comes up in one of the news reports where they start talking about the weather,
Oh,
and they're
okay.
like, "It's going to be a beautiful day in Kier,
Got
only
it.
such and such degrees."
Yeah.
So the town effectively was founded by Kier. So the
Yeah.
reach is probably very far. And then I think last episode when Mark was talking about where he used to teach, he is actually, maybe that's where his sister is in the next town over called Gans, Ganz.
Okay.
And he taught at Gans College. So he's not originally from Kier.
Right.
I guess he probably moved there to work, is my assumption, unless maybe they moved
Well,
there prior to him working there. I don't
well,
know.
I know. I think it was part of his working there. Is that's how he ended
Relocation,
up
right?
in Lumen housing because he talks about that on the
Right.
a little bit about going to live there and it's not as bad. Like you make it seem like the dorms, but
Right.
it's nice. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe with his drinking he lost his job, maybe he lost his house.
Mm.
and and that's why, because back to this weird town that he lives in, this weird housing development. You mentioned in the first episode that there seems to be nobody around but him and Selvig.
They're in this whole big housing
Right?
development, this corporate housing, and it looks like dorms and duplexes. They
Yeah.
all look
It,
exactly the same.
it bears the question, why don't other employees live there? Why is he not encountering other employees? So it might be a situation of like, if
That was
needed.
something that came up this episode too. Somebody was talking about Lumen housing. Wait, I think it comes up later with Petey.
He does. It does come up later, but it is in this episode. Yeah.
Basically, they talk about Lumen housing, and Mark makes mention that, it's just him and his neighbor to the right, Mr. Selvig, and how the neighborhood never really filled up.
Mm-hmm.
So when that was stated, I was just like, okay, well, now I have more questions. Like, were there supposed to be more people? Where did those people go?
Yeah. Is it intended for severed people, which wouldn't make sense if they don't want them to interact outside,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or maybe it's a test, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like if they're staggering their times, they might interact outside and still not know that they're all severed and all work there, whatever. I don't know. Or was it something that they intended for like all of the Lumen employees to live there and people opted out of
Yeah.
it?
That was my
I don't know.
question. I was just like, okay, they said it never filled up, which means they had an
Yeah.
intention for it to fill up, unless they're lying.
Right, unless they're lying, yeah. Which should be like the caveat for every theory ever. Um,
Gaslight, core value number one.
right. If it was intended for severed people, maybe they haven't been able to grow the severance as rapidly as they thought they were going to, because in Helly's orientation, either Helly or maybe it's one of Mark's entrances, they walk by empty office space that look exactly like the office space that the four that we know from MDR is. So there's cubicles that are
That's
not
true.
being used.
Oh, that was Helly's first day. I made a note of that too. They walked by an office that the color was different. It actually looked warmer and not as
Yeah.
like cold, and the
Yeah.
and the cubicles
Nobody
weren't
was
all
with.
connected, and no one was in there. So yeah, I did remember mentioning that in my notes, and I forgot to bring it up. Oh, and the walls were all glass, transparent. They weren't like in a
Yeah.
walled off white room. So it
Right.
was like, okay, what room was this supposed to be, and who was it supposed to be for?
Right.
And where are they? But yeah, so Mark and Petey are talking, right? And then Petey plays for Mark a recording of one of his break room sessions, which
Yes.
I'm like, how did he get that in there? How did he sneak that in there?
That's exactly my question. And then I think I have the answer in the next episode.
Ooh, okay. All right. Because I did not get an answer, but
Well, I think this is the first time we get the break room labeled the break room.
I think this is the first time we see it on, well,
Is because, and then Mark asked him, what the hell is that? And he
I
was
just,
like, "This is-"
I do remember when Mark went in, you saw it on the wall when Grainer opened the door for him, but they didn't
Oh,
call it
yeah.
the break room, but you did see it on the wall.
Yeah, and I don't think it gets mentioned in Lumen Space.
I don't remember when it gets
It
mentioned.
gets mentioned at the beginning of this when Helly and Dylan are talking, doesn't it?
Okay, I think you're right.
Yeah, right. I just made myself sound like a dummy.
Oh
He
no.
does say it when they're talking about like why might be
Right.
missing. He's like,
Could be in the break room.
well, he
Oh
did spend a night
yeah.
in the break room, and that's the first time Helly's like, but this is the first explanation of what's happening in the break room.
Yes,
And
exactly.
you hear Petey's scared voice.
It's very clear that he sounds very not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, the words that they're saying don't sound like anything disconcerting. I mean, they're weird, but it's not like you're reading like your last will and testament, or you're reading like a death threat.
Right.
But it's the way it's being said and the
Mm-hmm.
weird uneasy tranquility of Milchick's responses to it being said.
Right. So I think what's more disconcerting is that they do sound distressed while saying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does sound distressed. And then Milchick says, no, you need to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what section of the session this is for Petey. Is he playing the fifth time he had to say it, or is he playing the 5,000th and fifth time? Like how long has he been here? Because he sounds desperate while he's saying it.
And I think he even says, like, please.
Right. It definitely indicates that it's some weird form of torture.
And even as he's playing it back, you see him kind of going back in his mind to all those break room instances. So it's like clearly whatever's happening in there has left a lingering trauma.
Yeah.
And Mark's just looking like, okay, I mean, this sounds traumatic, but also it sounds innocuous. I don't understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. And when their interaction is done, it seems like Mark is just going to take off and Petey's just going to stay there. But then he doubles back and offers Petey to come back to his home with him so that he's not living in the weird greenhouse.
Right. In the winter, mind you.
Mm-hmm. So Petey does come back with Mark to their home. We don't see them go inside. The next thing we see is Mrs. Selvig peering out her window and basically being a peeping Tom. And she's sitting at her window just trying to see what's what. And apparently the window in the upper part of her house is in a position where she can see him, but he can't see her.
Right.
Because when the camera cut to her room, you couldn't see her sitting there, but then you could see her off to the side. And the window she's looking in goes directly to the door to Mark's basement. We see that he's already down there with Petey. Mm-hmm. So they clearly must have gotten back before the workday was done.
Right.
And before Cobell could be back at home, even though they don't have any awareness that Cobell is a threat or anything like that. He's getting Petey settled. Petey's talking a little bit more about the severance and reintegration, and I'm trying to think if anything else happened.
Well, he's just kind of paranoid, right? So he's asking, are you sure no one can see through that window? There's no cameras, that kind of thing, because he's paranoid. And if this is a Lumen town, this is the town of Kira, is new knowledge to me. Like he has every right to be paranoid that he's still being watched, right? And Mark is trying to reassure him that nobody's watching him and he's setting up a place for him to sleep, and there's a shower down there, so he's like, go in there and get settled. And then Petey starts having visions, so we start to see the visual that he's experiencing when he's having those moments of intense migraines and pain that we saw earlier in the greenhouse. And it's trippy.
Yep. It is trippy because it's like you see him at the mirror. Or wait, which one do you see first? The shower or the mirror?
The mirror.
And then his mirror self looks up and sees him in the shower, and it's his work self in the mirror. So it's like Petey with the suit.
Even before that, so before he even gets in the shower, he looks in the mirror and sees himself in the mirror at work in the work bathroom and starts to see a conversation. He starts re-experiencing a conversation with Irving, and then he shakes it off. You see he's like coughing up blood and Mark sink, and it's like, oh man, this is killing you. Then he shakes it off, he gets in the shower, and then it starts happening again. So now it's like,
and that's when it goes back and forth. Yeah,
right. It's like his work consciousness is seeing his current Outtie in the shower, and it's so jibble jabbled, and it's just like, okay, not only are these memories integrating, and I think he explains this maybe in the next episode or this episode, I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah, he does.
It goes back to the line about your chronological perceptions being severed. So it's not just about the space dictating your memories, but like he's getting them back all out of whack.
Mm-hmm. Clearly, like you said, he is not adjusting well. What he thinks is just, a little thing is clearly not. And it seems like it's getting worse, even just in the time that we've seen him deal with it. It's gone from just like a little twinge headache to like full on nosebleeds and cranium clutching and just not good.
This episode in the shower disorients him so much that he passes out in the shower. That's where this episode ends.
Half loop.
Boy,
there was a lot to cover in this episode. Man, there's so many things I can't wait till we talk about it. I'm so ready to get into them.
Right. I'm definitely enjoying the rewatching, and it just solidifies how much I love this show, because in preparation for this, I didn't just rewatch it once. I've watched it multiple times at this point, and every time I'm just like riveted.
Mm-hmm. Still love it, still into it, still invested, still discovering things.
Yes.
I hope you guys are enjoying the ride as much as we are. I think we have come to the end of our journey this go round. If you enjoyed this podcast, hit us up on our socials.
Follow us at the UUR Pod on Blue Sky and Threads, or you can email us at theuurpod@gmail.com.
So if you guys want to share some tidbits with us, maybe some things that you have learned or discovered, or maybe something that we didn't get to in this very long recap, maybe there's something that you discovered that we missed pointing out, feel free to hit us up and let us know about it. But otherwise, tune in next time where we will be covering episode 3 in perpetuity. Thank you for joining us on the UUR Severance podcast.
And remember, the numbers were scary.
Have a good night. There's a reason I say have a good night. I shouldn't explain it. If I have to explain it, it doesn't work. But I say have a good night because the Severance people don't get to have a good night. You get it? Anyway, bye.
Bye.